Let's take a few minutes to talk about how logic works in mathematics, specifically with the words and or. Okay, this becomes hugely important when we deal with inequalities, their solution sets and their graphs. Before you get into doing those, you have to reinforce this notion very strongly before you tackle that. So I want you to try and follow the color coordination as I go through this. Each of these tables here have compound sentences. Compound sentences are joined by conjunctions such as and or or. Okay, the top box, they're all and statements. The bottom box, they're all or statements. Each and statement is made up of two clauses, a red clause and a blue clause. I'm going to do some analysis on those in these columns. And then we're going to talk about the whole statement, which is purple. So you want to think of this entire sentence as purple because it's the blending together, it's the joining of the red and the blue. So you should know that from your English class, that two independent clauses can be joined by a conjunction such as and or to make one sentence. Okay, so let's see how we go here. None of these are meant to be tricky in and of themselves from the independent clause standpoint. They should be very straightforward in terms of the blue and the red. The tricky part is when we get to the purple. So let's get going and we'll try and make some observations as we go. I'm going to hold off on doing the purple part until I get through and fill out clause 1 and clause 2 for the box. So let's see what we have here. So the Phillies are a baseball team. That is true. 76ers are a basketball team. This is also true. Okay. The Earth is a planet. This is true. And the Sun is a planet. Oh, that is in fact false. Chickens are mammals. This is false. They're in the bird family. And snakes are reptiles. This is in fact true. Boston is a state. That is false. And Pennsylvania is on the west coast. Also false. Okay, so the first one should be very easy. If the first part is true and the second part is true, you shouldn't think that the entire thing when you join them together is anything but true. Okay, and the last one is very easy too. If one sentence is made up of two false parts, then it should make sense that the entire single sentence is false. Okay, now let's look at these two. The Earth is a planet and the Sun is a planet. Well, in an and statement, it's a very strict situation, and I don't think this sounds very true to me, because the word you have to associate with and is both. Both are not true. Therefore, the statement is a false statement, even though it has a true part. When we talk about and, we talk about both needing to be true. All the pieces of it need to be true for the final whole statement to be true. Similarly, in this next one, we see that chickens are mammals and snakes are reptiles. This is not a true statement either, because the false part offsets the true part in an and statement. Now, continuing on down to the or logic, I'm going to fill this table out the same way, and then hopefully we'll make some observations about or, and then do some compare and contrast between and or. Okay, the Eagles are a football team. This is definitely true. The Flyers are a hockey team. This is definitely true. And we're saying that the Eagles are a football team or the Flyers are a hockey team. Now, the one thing I want you to realize here is this is not a question. It's a statement, and every statement from a mathematical standpoint can be true or false. There are no sort ofs, okay? So Mars is an asteroid. Well, this is false because Mars is a planet. Or Saturn is a planet. Well, Saturn is a planet. So the red clause is in fact true. Frogs are amphibians. That is a true statement. Frogs are mammals. That is a false statement. France is a state in America. This is a false statement. And then we've got that Kentucky is a country. This is also a false statement. Now let's talk about or here a little bit. Or is not as strict or restrictive. Okay, when you're dealing with or, um, it's going to be less restrictive. However, restrictive or not, two easy ones here that we should look at are the first and the fourth. Okay, if two parts of a statement are true, it really doesn't matter if it's joined by and or. The whole thing's got to be true. Okay, and if in fact two statements are false, when you join them with and or, it's still going to be false. Okay, this is not like two negatives make a positive. When you multiply them, or two wrongs um, don't make a right, in fact, would be a better analogy. Okay, so let's take a look here. Mars is an asteroid, or Saturn is a planet. Well, guess what? That is in fact true, because one or the other is in fact true. Now, frogs are amphibians or frogs are mammals. That's also a true statement, because one or the other is true. So let's take a look here for a second. Okay? With or, we see that one or two truths makes the entire statement true. Okay? And not the same in an and logic, because you have to have two truths to make the whole statement true. If you notice here, anytime you have at least one false in an and statement, the whole statement's false. But anytime you have one true or more in an or statement, the whole statement is true. So the one thing I hope you're taking from this is that and is more restrictive than or. You'll see this somewhat in probability. It'll be a help too. So you have to get this logic down, but it's very, very, very important that you understand it for when we graph inequalities. So I hope this was a good 7.5 minutes out of your life here that we're taking up to look at this. So in the end, an and statement, all its parts must be true for the whole statement to be true. For an or statement, only one part needs to be true for the entire statement to be true.